Bryce, so you think that all these like cog manipulation stuff in like reaction step and damage step is the best way to play Puffin or the best feints in Puffin? The actual best feint in Puffin is every time you boost, you kind of hesitate like, okay, mech card, thank God. Like just the feint that you might be not playing mech cards, but it's a mech card every time. Same thing with Foundry Heart. You always like two mech cards, okay, cool. Two resources and I'll do whatever.
Anthony, you were not doing that to people at nationals, were you?
I was kind of doing that. I was kind of doing that. Just once or twice, just throw them off, you know.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Bryce Platts. Welcome back to the Arcane Games and Events YouTube channel. We've got yet another special deck tech for you because a lot of the AGE Pro team members brought pirate decks because of the High Seas release to U.S. Nationals in Vegas in 2025. The one sitting next to me is Anthony Pham, and he is no exception. He brought Puffin Hightail after some extensive testing over the 2 weeks that he had all of the spoilers and at Talishar access basically to do what he does best, which is build mechanized decks. Anthony has gone through tons of trials and tribulations in trying to figure out the optimal build for Puffin. He's been banging his head against the wall. One day this deck sucks. One day this deck might be okay. Then after a couple testing sessions, we finally have a steel blade of a deck that is ready to go for U.S. Nationals. Anthony, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. U.S. Nationals was a lot of fun. It was not great in terms of results, but it was a grandiose time with the friends. Unfortunately, the Honda Pilot, which we usually cruise to Vegas and like close by tournaments with, was under maintenance. So we took teammate Marcus's Ford Escape, not a sponsor by the way, to Vegas. Unfortunately, the carpool buff did not translate as well. A lot of us didn't convert to day twos, whatever tournament we were playing. But overall, it was a fun time. I can't complain. Hanging out with the friends is so fun. Vegas is one of those locations where it's close by. Close enough to where the locals can come out, like your local players from SoCal, and also you can see your intercontinental friends too. So like people from the East Coast, the Middle Coast, and the West Coast coming out to enjoy their time.
I'm sorry, did you say the Middle Coast?
Yes. So like Texas and all the middle coastern states.
But none of the, you don't have any friends from Kansas or like North Dakota or anything like
I
that?
guess I guess Josh from Iowa counts.
Wow, I think you
I
actually
don't know
got it
where
right.
Iowa is I don't know where Iowa is geographically, but it feels like it's a middle coastern state.
There's no way it matters. But I'm glad you got to see your friends. And what I have to ask, something related to Vegas. What was the most amount of money you lost, and what was the best thing you ate?
The most amount of money I lost was $80 because I entered the calling. But I guess I did too, so it doesn't really count as losing. But I guess the Nationals was free, so I didn't really lose a bunch of money. I did buy a bunch of Puffin cards to bling out my deck, so maybe that can count as a loss of money. I spent like a couple hundred to bling out with like the EA Palantirs and whatnot.
Mm.
So it looks pretty cool now. So I'm really happy about it. What was the second question again?
The second one was, what was the best thing you ate?
The best thing I ate, it was definitely that sushi night we had on day, I think it was Friday after the first day. A couple of the Aged Pro team members went out to sushi. We went back to the place where Andrew Rudin projectile vomited outside. So we ran it back, and he did not do that this time. So we had a lot of fun. We enjoyed it.
So we're up big.
We are up big. We did not cause any stirrings outside the restaurant. I know last time it was pretty funny because he ate too much. Well, long story short, Andrew Rudin, he ate way too much and he was already super tired and nauseous, so he started projectile vomiting outside after we went outside, and we had to convince all the patrons that hey, this restaurant's really good, you should come in and eat, while Andrew is projectile vomiting on their curb.
So we're up big, and so are all of the patrons because Andrew Rudin was able to keep everything down.
Exactly. We did take a memoir or like a photo of that curb and him again. This time with no vomit in sight, just him smiling. So good times, good times.
Yeah, Anthony, I guess we have to remind everybody out there in Radio Land, when Andrew was feeling so bad last year, what did you walk up and say to him to comfort him?
Honestly, Justin keeps telling me that it's so memorable, but I always forget. I feel like I think I said that I've never, no one's ever been more jealous of someone throwing up right now or something. That's what I said to Justin, just because we were all so full. But
What I was fishing for was we're all gonna make it, bro.
oh yes, that the infamous saying, we are all gonna make it, bro. So, if you ever feel like throwing up at sushi because you ate too much and you don't want to get charged that surcharge, we're all gonna make it, bro. Just power through. The
Okay,
parking
well,
lot is free will.
if everybody's breakfast is still with them, then let's go ahead and proceed on to your journey with Puffin Hightail. You have always been a mechanologist sympathizer. You have been tooling around with Dash IE for as long as I've known you in this game. You had a stint with Dash IO. What is it about Puffin Hightail that drew you to her and maybe siphoned you off from the other mechanologists in the game?
Well, I guess we to start off, I've not always been a mechanologist player. I started off with Brute and then moved into Good Brute, which is Runeblade. And then I moved into Dash because I thought I picked like actually the worst time to get into mechanologist because it was when Bright Lights came out, so I bought all the mech cards at their peak. But I guess we did start talking more early last year, so that's when my mech journey began. But I guess I got into Puffin because she's kind of the next iteration of mech. Hearing that a mech came out in this set, I was super stoked to see how it would work. And then seeing her hero ability come out, I was like, wow, she might be the first mech that doesn't revolve around boost, kind of like Teklevossen. Um, so I was super interested in learning how she plays and like what sort of combos she gets into. But sometimes you just can't stay away from boosting. It's too much fun.
Oh, spoilers for the rest of the video.
Yeah.
Go ahead and put a pin in that boost comment. For now, we need to take a journey to the beginnings of Anthony's brewing with Puffin. Anthony, you've sent me a couple different deck lists. You tried several different iterations of Puffin on your journey to finding the 80 that you brought to US Nationals. And this is the first one before us. This one's called Pirate Puffin. Give me an overview of what this deck is all about. And eventually we'll get to why it doesn't work.
Yeah. I think honestly, so I don't think any of these decks don't work. I think they just have a certain style to them, and they obviously have their strengths, but a lot of them have their weaknesses very and can get exploited pretty easily. And this is kind of one of them. So Pirate Puffin was the first iteration of Puffin that I explored, just because I was like, this is the first mech that doesn't boost. We're not going to put any boost cards in there. We're going to slam some generics in there, and we're going to play all the really good pirate cards. So you see stuff like Conquer the High Seas. You'll notice like some pummels too. We'll get into that in a bit. You'll see all like the pirate blues, so like Sunken Treasure, Sea Floor Salvage, Tip the Barkeep, Pinion Sentry, which is like the new card. And a lot of these are like gold generators, so we're kind of playing towards that Puffin Hero ability, where if you break a gold, you can make a golden cog. So we're trying to make gold while also playing all these really above rate pirate cards in the blue slot and also in the red slot. So this is kind of the first exploration, just trying to get a feel for the hero, see if Pirate Puffin is the way to go. And this was basically my first experience playing with it. I played a lot of this to start out, and it felt really good to start out. Honestly, it kind of falls into like that mid-range category, I would say. Being not super aggressive, but kind of like blocking a little bit, then swinging back a little bit, kind of this tempo back and forth. One of the really bad things I saw with the deck right away was when you're trying to crank and draw that extra card for the card advantage, you would often draw a lot of your blocking cards. So stuff like Pinion Sentry or the one Sunken Treasure. You would draw those on the tempo, and if you don't have Crown of Providence, you can't really arsenal those, so you kind of just IP yourself. So that was one of the really bad things I saw with the deck right away. I didn't really like that part. But I feel like the deck still has a lot of legs. Like it kind of plays the mid-range game really well. If people disrespect all your attacks like Zeppelin or Cloud City Steamboat, hell, even like Dovetail, which is the most egregious, you can eke out a lot of value. If they don't block your Dovetail and you have 3 cogs out, you could just pump it all the way to 7, give it go again, reset all the cogs. So you basically just did like a 1 card, like, or it's a 1 for like 10 basically, because it resets all the cogs. So there's a lot of value to be eked out with this deck. I really like it. If the meta calls for like a mid-range Puffin, I think this would be the version I would lean towards. But like I said before, it has those vices where you kind of draw and you're looking for tempo off the top of your deck, and you just draw like a blocking card, and your turn's basically over. You IP yourself and you move on to the next hand.
My guess is that's why we are including Eye of Ophidia here, the an attempt to make it so the top card of your deck is nothing but gas, right?
Yeah, yeah. Iophidic is in there just because all the pirates have gold in some capacity. So being able to draw the card you want off a gold, whether that be double cranking or just straight up cracking a gold, is always going to be really strong. And we're not boosting, so we're not worried about the generics in this deck. So Iophidia is in there just to kind of filter as a one of and kind of get cute with it when you're trying to draw off your gold and whatnot.
It does seem in general that you were pretty desperate to find gold generators because of this card in the inventory. Performance bonus from heavy hitters. Gains go again when it's played from Arsenal and creates a gold token on hit. Was that kind of the overall thesis of this deck?
Yeah, I kind of how I build decks typically is I start off with around eight equipment just to kind of that's kind of like the safe spot because you can run 60 cards in the main board and then you can run 12 sideboard cards, kind of the math how the math works. So this is just baseline eight equipment and then 60 of the best cards I thought was good for the deck and then all the 12 is typically sideboard cards and performance bonus is definitely one of those. I definitely bring it into Gravy and not much else after that because I kind of predicted that Gravy would be a very popular deck just because it's kind of the new illusionist on the block. And performance bonus is really good because it generates a gold, which is really good for your hero ability, and it's also three damage, which kills a lot of different allies. And you can also arsenal it to kind of keep your turn going. So it could be three go again, then you crank, you break the gold that you get to crank once, and then you crank twice with a different thing, and you kind of draw and keep your turn going like that. So that was kind of the theory behind performance bonus, at least. But like I said, with this deck, I just the real thing I really hate about it is when you have all the tempo in the world. The two main things, I guess, with this deck. The worst thing is when you really need a card off the top to attack. Like say you have Goldwing Turbine, that buffs your next mech attack by three, and you really need like another. You have another copper cog in your hand. You're gonna double crank to hopefully get an attack off the top, and then you just draw a Pinion Sentry or you draw a Sunken Treasure. It's like okay, I will shoot my pistol for five or six, and I will not arsenal my block card because I can't get rid of it. And pass you, and then now your opponent knows that you have a block card, so they can kind of morph their turn around, trying to manipulate that too. And that's the other annoying thing with this deck when you kind of steal tempo with like CNC Pummel or like Conquer the High Seas into CNC, something that like strips their entire hand. You'll draw up and you'll notice that you draw a lot of blocking cards. And you're like, okay, well, if you don't attack me and I have Golden Skyward in my hand, I have a couple Pinion Sentries, like my turn is going to be so bad because you didn't attack me. And I think that's a strategy that a lot of people were deploying against Puffin, where they would kind of play this aggressive game plan. And once Puffin makes like two to three cogs, they'll realize that, okay, this is Puffin's big turn. I'm just going to block and then reset because Puffin has no way to make more cogs unless she draws the actual cog cards. And half of those are going to be like the defensive ones, like Pinion Sentry or Sunken Treasure, or I guess the other one is C4 Salvage, but you have to play on their turn. But yeah, basically, people are just like not allowing Puffin to regain tempo by not attacking on the tempo turn. So you would just basically lose all your cogs. You'd have to reset, and if you didn't draw a cog in the machine, Cogworks Workshop, or X amount of copper cogs, your turn was basically going to be like five damage.
It sounds kind of like a similar issue that Vincent can run into where your opponent, blocks out with everything that they have on a turn where you have a ton of rune chance. You go into your next one with absolutely none, and you don't find an attack in the hand that you can banish and utilize that one rune chant on offense for.
Yeah, often I found myself IPing myself a lot, or I found myself IPing a lot with this deck, like drawing extra cards and just being stuck with it in hand or in arsenal, and not being able to clear and get that really high value per turn. I think if there was like in a vacuum, if your opponent attacked you every turn, this deck is like so cracked because you're able to kind of manipulate your cogs and resources so well if they're attacking you every turn. But that's just not how Flesh and Blood works. People like have decision making and can adapt on the fly. So there will be turns where they just don't attack you or like don't allow you to do the thing. So it's not a very proactive deck. It's a very reactive deck. This version. So I tend to like playing more proactive decks where it kind of asks the question to your opponent rather than kind of reactionary and like reacting to what your opponent's doing on the fly.
Okay, so that is this iteration, ladies and gentlemen, is Pirate Puffin, and We've already kind of gone over the overall strategy of it. This is the mid-rangey kind of vibe as far as Anthony's deck building goes. Let's move on now, Anthony, to something that I think is going to be very off the beaten path for anyone who has been ingesting Puffin Hightail content. This deck is scripted. It's a combo deck based all around one card. So let's go over that card first, Anthony. That's Megahertz script.
All right. So this deck is definitely scripted because it's playing around this specific card, and we're not even playing 3 of because I think it would be too clunky. But basically, Megahertz Script is a card that came out in Bright Lights, and it's always a card that's piqued my interest because Mech has always been the go again class because of boosting, because of getting free action points back because you banished a Mech card from your deck. And this card coming out really piqued my interest because I was like, maybe this is future space for a Mech that doesn't boost, a Mech that needs action points based off this specific item. And this item kind of is a match made in heaven for Puffin. From a theoretical standpoint, it cranks, so it gets you half a card. And it gives all your really good cog attacks go again. If you notice on a lot of the attacks for Puffin, the common and rare ones, they have the option to give go again. And if you give them go again, it's basically the same rate as a boost attack. But if they already have go again from Megahertz script, you can actually give it +1. So they're actually way above rate compared to the Arcane Rising attacks, which is insane because Sky Skimmer would be 5 go again for 0 for 5 go again. The Cloud Skiff would be 1 for 6 go again. And then Zeppelin and all those were like 2 for 8 go agains, 1 for 8 go again. So like if you're able to use your cogs just for the plus damage, this deck can get really crazy. So that's why I kind of built the entire deck around Megahertz script and trying to keep it around. I have like Plasma mainline in the sideboard as well. And then you'll notice that I run all the +1 attacks basically. It's just to kind of cheat out that value and trying to make those cogs, have the Megahertz script, and then now you're basically playing Channel Mount Heroic Mech, where you can just give plus damage to all your attacks, and it is even more nasty with like Dovetail, because Dovetail becomes a guaranteed 1 for 8 if they don't block it. And then it resets all the cogs, so you can do it to the next attack again. It's a pretty fun deck, but it is a combo deck in nature, and it's really hard to kind of set up everything to assemble Exoded, because you typically only have one turn with Megahertz script, unless you have Plasma mainline out. That one turn either comes from you playing it out and not cranking it, so you're setting up for next turn, or playing out the turn the same turn that you played it on to draw a card to get the card back. But it comes out with 0 counter, so you'll lose it next turn. So without Master Cog or Plasma mainline, you basically only have one turn, and in that one turn, you have to have the window of having 2 to 3 cogs, and also having relevant attacks. So if everything lines up, the math can go definitely super crazy. And I wish Megahertz came in with like 1 counter or 2 counters, just keep it around a little bit longer. But if everything lines up, it's one of the most above rate decks in the world, I think. But it's really the hard part that through testing it, just getting everything to line up, getting all 3 facets of the deck to line up with the cogs, the attacks that are relevant, and Megahertz script. It's just really tough.
It does seem like you'd be treading water for quite a bit trying to line up this fabled 3 cog Megahertz script turn, and hey, why not also pepper in the other script in this deck, Penetration script, which will basically have an Art of War effect on that big turn if it all lines up.
Yeah. Theoretically, the math is all there if you can line up that really big turn. I think it'll be a lot easier in the matches where you can play Plasma mainline and kind of have that time to set up. The deck still blocks really well, like including all the cards that have like the plus damage. They're all 3 blocks, so it's pretty easy to kind of play that mid range game. It is. You can kind of mostly get 2 out of the 3 parts of the combo really easily with either cogs, Megahertz script being out, or like the attacks. Most often you can get the Megahertz script out and have the attacks, but it's really the hard part is like having the cogs to kind of balance it out. So that's why I run cards that kind of help the deck glue together. So stuff like Tighten the Screws. If you're really short on cogs, this is a really cool way to kind of manipulate the cogs. So I think it's next to Master Cog. There you go. So this is a really cool card because if you say you have Megahertz script out and you send like a Sky Skimmer for 4, and then you give it +1, and then you only have 1 cog for the turn. So what you'll do is you'll play Tighten the Screws, untap that cog, and then now that cog is +1. It's basically a 1 for 5 somewhere else. So this card can get out of hand if you don't have dovetail to kind of reset on your turn, and you really need to reset a cog for pounce your aeronaut. This can be like you have three cogs out, you play Sky Skimmer, and give it +1 for go again, or +1, and then for it comes in for 5 go again because of megahertz script. And then now you only have two cogs left, so pounce your aeronaut doesn't turn on. But if you pitch a blue to play tighten the screws and have two floating for the aeronaut, now aeronaut comes in for 10, and you have the three cogs set up. So it'll be 10, go to the 13, go again, then you shoot your pistol again if you want to use your unicycle and whatnot. So the math can get definitely crazy, like I said before. If everything lines up like this, the math per turn is like 20 to 30 easily. It's just really trying to get all the math to line up in one turn is really hard.
And to, of course, not die on the road to getting there.
Yeah, and with decks like Azalea, all the assassins going super fast, like you don't have a lot of time to kind of set up. I think in a vacuum, this deck might be insane, but the fear of interaction kind of took me away from playing this deck. Although it was really fun to test, it just like never really lined up consistently, and you definitely want a consistent deck when it comes to mech at least.
Is there a chance that you'll be returning to this deck now that one of the big bad disruptive bullies, new Alluring Desire, has Living Legend?
I don't think so, just because Syndra's still a really big target, a really big place in the meta. With how fast she is, you don't really have a lot of time to set up all, like Exodia basically. So I think if it was a slower format, something like Heavy Hitters maybe, where everyone's just trying to extract the most value out of their 4 card hand every turn, I think that is kind of like the ideal meta where people are just trying to go super slow and extract like 15 value out of their cards every turn. This Puffin deck can definitely take advantage of that, where you're able to kind of take 1 or 2 turns to set up, and then you go like a 30 damage, 30 value turn out of nowhere with megahertz script out and maybe a penetration script and a bunch of the +1 attacks.
All right, Anthony. So we've talked about a pirate iteration and now a combo iteration. But for you, my friend, all roads lead to boosting. So this last one, and the one we're here to talk about, is, of course, Anthony Pham's Puffin Boost Nats 2025 deck list. What finally convinced you that it's time to do what mechs do best and boost?
Yeah, so after slamming, like I said, I was slamming my head against the wall trying to make Pirate Puffin work, and like one night I was like off the deep end playing that combo deck, and I was like, why isn't this working? Oh right, I know why it's working. It's because I'm trying to get a 15 card hand in a 4 card game. So just finally landed on boosting because I always meme with our team that Zipper Hit Red will always be good no matter what meta it is. 1 for 5 Gogan will always be clutch. So I finally decided, you know what? Let's strip the deck down to only mech cards and just try boosting, and we'll include all the relevant boost cards and see how it works. And in theory, I always thought that Boost Puffin would be really good because she's probably the best converter of her draw card ability. Just because she's able to draw cards that are actually relevant, whether that be to set up for next turn or to continue like beating them down in the same turn. So I started off thinking about what are the best boost cards to put in the deck. So I can't put stuff like Max V, Pulse Wave, where it counts the amount of times it boosted because I'm playing so many non-boost cards. So I'm just going to include all of the Arcane Rising ones and slowly work from there. So I put in 0 to 60, Zipper Hit, Throttle, and then I also included Fast and Furious because it's actually one of the most relevant boost cards in the game right now for this deck. Where if you crank this turn, which you do a lot, it's basically 0 to 60. But also when you banish this from boosting, you actually get to put a steam counter on an item you have with crank. So you can put this on your copper cog, you can put this on your golden cog, and kind of keep that cog around. So it's kind of like a really nice addition to the Arcane Rising boost cards. More often than not, it's a 0 for 4. But in the off chance that you boost it off the top of your deck, you kind of keep that cog around, and then it keeps the threat of like Cogwork Zeppelin, Dovetail, and Palantir alive for you.
So speaking of cogs, Anthony, that's kind of the centerpiece besides boosting about Puffin Hightail in general. Let's talk about this card. This one, at least early on, I should mention, is Copper Cog, by the way. There was some resistance to this card, I think, for you and the mechanologist community at large. Yes, it says unlimited on it, but it is a blue, cost 0, all good things, but it doesn't block. It enters the arena with two steam counters at the start of your turn, destroyed unless you remove a steam counter from it. I know you seem to be resisting putting any number of these in your deck if you could avoid it, at least in that early phase of deck building. However, you've ended up with 10 copper cogs in this Nationals deck list. Talk to me about your personal journey with copper cog.
Yeah, so it started off as like a meme because you're like, okay, this is like relentless rats from Magic. Like you could put as many as you want. Like surely it's not that good and it's just a meme, right? So I started off not having it in my deck because the Pirate Puffin one is kind of a mid-range deck and you don't want a lot of non-blocks. And then I started, slowly going up into more cogs because of the combo deck where you want like a certain amount of cogs in your deck just to be able to enact the combo. And then as I played with Puffin more and more, I slowly realized how good Copper Cog is. And I just realized like this is the best blue to draw ever. Like it doesn't matter. Like Cogworks Workshop kind of pales in comparison to it. Pales in comparison to it. A lot of the blues I played during this tournament, I would not want to see this when I drew it off Puffin's ability. But if I drew a Copper Cog, I was happy almost every single time because it's either another cog to fuel my current turn. So like, say I had two cogs from like I played Copper Cog and then like activated Polycranko or like played two Copper Cogs out, and I already had a Palantir. I'm thinking about like using my unicycle to activate Palantir. If I drew another Copper Cog, I could just slam it down and it comes in with one Steam counter and it like exists for the next turn as well. And I could use it as my third cog for the turn to power up whatever I need, whether that be Dovetail or Palantir. Or if I drew it and it didn't like really fit with my current turn and I can't use it very well, I can just arsenal it. And I don't feel bad arsenaling it because it's half a card draw next turn too. So like say I go into next turn with tempo, I can play Copper Cog and then another Copper Cog I drew to draw another card. And it kind of like resets the cycle over and over. So I think this was like it was kind of like that light bulb moment where I realized, oh my gosh, this card is actually good because it kind of does everything you want. It's a pitch card, it cranks for you, and it's a cog that like kind of empowers your attacks. It's literally everything you want, and you don't feel bad arsenaling it. So the only downside it doesn't block, and I thought about that for a long time. Like, why would I include items in my deck that don't block? Where Puffin is like a really block heavy deck. I thought about it. I was like, wait, we should just play Boost Puffin. This is kind of where it all started too. We should just play Boost Puffin because you never really want to block anyway when you're playing an aggro deck and you're trying to boost them down. And being able to use the cogs to kind of power your attacks alongside the boost cards is really good. So that it kind of like was the light bulb moment here when I was like, okay, I understand it now. We're gonna play an aggro Puffin with boost cards, and our glue is gonna be copper cogs. I just need to find out how many. So I started off with like some absurd number, like 15 or something, and I kind of dialed it down because I realized, okay, maybe too many cogs is bad. So we're gonna dial it down slowly, and I kind of found that like 9 to 12 was like the beautiful number that I wanted to see.
And you ended up settling on 10. I have to ask you, Anthony, in a game that is so math obsessed, for those that are trying to really put a value number on a copper cog, you've mentioned several times that it equals half of a card in certain respects. Do you have like I don't know, do you have a value equation that you usually like to line up with copper cog in order to justify it being in the deck, or is it just kind of all these moments that you have kind of put together and made you feel like this is a pretty darn good card to be drawing?
Yeah, so I toyed with like the hyper geometric calculator a little bit. I knew that I wanted a certain amount of blues in my deck, and I think I hit like I think I stayed around like the 22-ish range if I
22
remember
exactly.
correctly. Yeah, yeah. So I think 22 was like the magic number for my deck and how often I wanted to see blues to kind of power my turn. And then from there, I was kind of debating, okay, X amount of these 22 blues has to be Copper Cogs, and the rest of them have to be good cards that are better than Copper Cog or like equivalent to Copper Cog. So I started off by including all the blues that I thought were really good, so like Blue Throttle, Cogworks Workshop. I don't think I played Soup Up in this iteration, unfortunately.
No.
But for sure, it was like Throttle, Cogworks Workshop, and the Blue Goldwing Turbine, and then Zeppelin was kind of my choice of the four blues that weren't Copper Cog, and then the rest were going to be Copper Cog no matter what, just to kind of round out the deck. And I kind of wanted 9 to 12 because in the ratio in which you drew like cards off the top of your deck, if you're running a clean 60 boost, you would see Copper Cog and certain I forget the number, but it was a certain amount of times where I would be happy seeing it. And in playtesting, kind of worked out that way where I was drawing a lot of blues, and more often than not, I was really happy arsenaling either Throttle, Workshop, Copper Cog or Goldwing Turbine or Zeppelin. And in the end, I think that was kind of the Copper Cog ended up being like the best blue I drew every time. Like if I drew any of the other blues, I was like, damn, I really wish this was Copper Cog. So like I honestly think you should go even higher, but I don't know if you should go to 15 because 15 was like the initial number I tested and it was way too much. But I think people that are afraid to run many Copper Cogs, I think if you're running lower than 9, I think it's too little. If you're playing like a boost variant at least.
So let's pivot a little bit, Anthony. Those are kind of the two main cornerstones of the deck: the boost edition and also kind of the number of copper cogs you're running. I want to turn now to the equipment suite because it is very different than either of the other iterations that you were testing early on. The first thing that I want to cover is this Crown of Dominion. It seemed kind of like an auto include for a lot of these pirate heroes because all of them have hero text box that care about gold tokens. For this iteration of Puffin, how important is that first gold token to have?
I think it's super important. As I play more and more with this card, I feel like it's less relevant than in Gravy Bones because Gravy Bones, the reason why the gold is so good in Gravy Bones is because their turns can definitely suck if they have no gold at all. And it kind of is the same way in Puffin, where if you can't get that crank or if you can't get that first copper cog out and you just have all these attacks in your hand that involve cogs, being able to run Crown Dominion and get that cog on demand is often a way to convert like into Gogan or convert into damage. So say if you have like a skiff or a skimmer and or all skiffs and skimmers in your hand, you literally cannot get Gogan unless you have a cog. Crown Dominion will bail you out because you can crank off the gold and then you can activate Polycranka and in like tandem, Polycranka and Crown Dominion equals one card draw. So you have access to that whenever you want. And then you can give Go against your skimmer and convert, what was once a 4 card like 5 damage is now like a 4 card like 10 or 12. So it kind of like saves you out of that really bad scenario. But the more I play with this deck, I feel like the less you need this card if you run more Copper Cogs. So I think the helmet slot is a highly contested part of Puffin's equipment suite. There's like super good generic ones like Crown of Providence or Balance of Justice, depending on your meta. You also have the Viziertronic, which comes in for a lot of the AB matchups. So Crown Dominion, I feel like gets less and less space if you run more Copper Cogs because you have this critical mass from your deck at least of being able to convert your hand into Cogs, and you won't need like that gold to kind of bail you out if you run a critical mass of Copper Cogs or like Cog making cards. But it kind of started off in the deck as that failsafe of like, okay, my turn is gonna suck unless I literally crank out a cog. And Crown of Minion was kind of in there for the matchups where I didn't need to clear an arsenal. I just needed to get my turn going super fast. So it was in there against the slower matchups, stuff like Florian, where I didn't want to miss a turn of tempo and try to boost them down before they kind of bloomed with their hero ability. But the more and more I played with this deck, the more and more I played with this card, I really didn't like it, honestly. Like I found myself siding in Viziertronic often, Crown of Providence often, just because of like Azalea, Assassin. So it kind of doesn't see a lot of play in the meta, and I think now with new leaving, there's going to be more decks that draw cards like Syndra, maybe KO comes back into the format, so I think Balance of Justice might be a good substitution for the Crown of Dominion.
Sounds like it was an answer to a similar but equal opposite problem that you were dealing with the pirate variant of this deck, where, playing almost too mid-range with pirate, you would have this issue where your turn doesn't do anything if your opponent doesn't do anything affirmative and allow you to block with those block cards or your golden sky wardens in hand. In this case, you were trying to prevent the scenario where you take all of the tempo from your opponent and then can't keep your foot on the gas.
Yeah, it kind of acted as the failsafe, but the more I built out the deck, I realized that the deck just makes so many cogs anyway, and this gold is often a crutch sometimes because you don't really want to play against Gravy Bones or Marlin in fact, because both of them run gold beta hook, and they can actually steal the gold you start with on the first turn often too with overpower and whatnot. So this card doesn't come in against the Pirate Mirror, and it doesn't see a lot of play into like a lot of the top decks. So I eventually kind of cut it from my list. But it kind of started in there just because I wanted to have something to just start my turn, basically, if I didn't have a cog otherwise. But the more I play with this deck, like I said, just I don't think you need it. Shout out to all the players out there that don't want to buy this card because it's so expensive right now. You don't need it, I don't think, for Puffin.
Let's move on to the arm slot, Anthony. You mentioned gold baited hook, and that seems to be an almost auto include into certain variants of Marlin and then almost all variants of Gravy Bones. Why are the Cogworks Tinkerings the choice for Puffin?
All right, not all pirate classes are created equally. If you notice, for Puffin, I think both of the cards are here in the deck, in the sideboard. There are only two pirate mechanized attacks, and it's Jolly Bludger, which is a really big sideboard card, and then Golden Skywarden, which is definitely a sideboard card as well. Um,
Surely
those two are the only ones.
Oh no, Palantir Aeronaut is not.
No,
Oh my goodness.
Dash IO can play this, yeah. So you only have two attacks. One of them where you don't even want to attack with it, with the Golden Skywarden, and one which is a sideboard card. So running Gold Beta Hook would basically be a glorified Battle Worn 1. I guess you could like threaten to make a gold if you play Bludger in main board, but like, you never, that's not what I wanted to play towards. So I wanted to include the new one because it blocks 2. Typically mech arms are really bad. It's always been like Battle Worn 1 with the generic slot basically. But this one blocks 2 and you can create a golden cog, which is insane because it opens up so many play lines where if you run Pinion Sentry with Puffin, you can actually block with this and Pinion Sentry. And then you can layer it since you're the defending player. You can create both. You own both effects. You can create the golden cog first, crank it, and then you could tap that golden cog you just cranked with Pinion Sentry to make another cog and crank that cog. And then you just drew a card because you cranked twice. Because Puffin's hero ability says each turn that you crank twice, not only during your action phase. So if you crank twice defensively, you actually draw another card. So this in tandem with a 3 block from hand is actually getting you another card. So you're going card neutral, and you end your turn with like 2 cogs being destroyed. So it opens up lines for like Soup Up getting go again, Steel Street Hoons getting +2 on their boost. So there's a lot of cool ways this card kind of puts value onto the board. And in the end, you can also just not crank the cog, and then have a cog going into your next turn too. If you're like on 2 cogs and you have an aeronaut in hand that you really want to use, you can block with Tinker Rings and then not crank that cog, go into your next turn with 3 cogs and just hit them with aeronaut with the ability on.
Onto the chest slot, Anthony, because we have no other options for the arms save for the adaptive dissolver, which I imagine comes in for very heavy arcane barrier matchups. The chest slot, this is the first time in the 3 iterations you sent me that you have more than one. In the other 2, Fandel Spring Tunic was the choice, and this card has been talked about ad nauseum since the beginning of the game. Just a really, really good thing to have, a free resource every 3 turns. Let's instead focus our conversation on the Teklo Foundry Heart. Because this is the boost variant, this is the first time where it has made sense at all as an include here. But when does it trump the Fandel Spring Tunic? In what matchups?
Yeah, so this is speaking first, Teklo Foundry Heart, busted card. It blocks for 3 and it gives you a free resource whenever you want, which is kind of insane. It comes in for those faster matchups, so matchups where you're not trying to set up really big turns, you're just trying to go balls to the wall, cogs to the wall, I guess, every single turn. So like stuff like Syndra, the Assassins, you don't really want time to set up. You just want to go super ham because more often than not, they're trying to convert their cards offensively. So if you're just like slamming the gas on them, this is definitely the card that you want in there. And also it's Battle Worn 2 and then Battle Worn 1. So like it's really good against the same classes like Assassin, Azalea, Syndra, where you have to like block that 1 critical attack. This is like a Battle Worn 2 in tandem with like stuff like Unicycle. You can block CNC super easily with this Unicycle and then plus a 3 block from hand. So the math works out really well in those matchups where you are boosting more often than not. I think a more important actually part of the equipment is not Teklo Foundry Heart. It's actually the Unicycle and the Adaptive Dissolver. So I started off actually playing Achilles Accelerator. There you go. You're boosting the deck, you get a free action point. That's pretty good. But I found that when I put in Achilles Accelerator against like AB3 matchups, I would have an awkward arm slot because my Cogworks mech arms would be just basically useless against Kano and maybe would get value against Verdance if they actually attack me for once. So I found it really weird to run Achilles because I was like, I don't really want AB in my leg slot because my arm slot would be useless. So I'm going to run Adaptive Dissolver as my AB1 and then move it to my arm slot and then keep Unicycle in because unicycle actually has a lot of techs against wizards where if you like T-bone, T-bone, T-bone Palantir, you could use the unicycle to kind of manipulate that third cog really easily. And then blow up like their Storm Striders, which is like a really big boon for them throughout the game. So they basically lose their kill turn when you're trying to boost them down. So I think Unicycle often comes in for the AB3 matchup because it's actually offensive leaning, where you can get the block one on certain attacks, but also convert and do some tricky stuff like Zeppelin with two cogs. If they block seven because they think you're just gonna bump to eight and then not be able to get an extra cog, you can actually plus two because you tap two cogs to go to eight with Zeppelin, and then you can untap Unicycle to, you can tap, or you can use Unicycle to untap a cog and get that extra cog to be able to tap it and then make another cog off the Zeppelin ability after it hits. And you can crank that one if it's your second crank for the turn. You draw a card. You can keep the turn going by cranking that cog and then shooting your Spitfire for two. This shoot card is pretty insane, and the fact that it's battle worn 1/2 is so helpful. You can just block with it, and then like now you're basically sitting on there. It's kind of like the new boots, not the new boots, the plus one boots from Assassin, or the plus one hands from Assassin, where you can give it's I forget what it's called for new, but it like gives the attack plus one. You make like a Fang Strike. It's kind of like that in that regard, where it just kind of sits on the table forever. Like if you play a Palantir with two cogs, they're gonna wonder like, is this guy gonna crack Unicycle to give the plus two, the final plus one to the attack and destroy the equipment? More often than not, it's just like a really big trick that you can have up your sleeve or up your pant leg, I guess, because it's a unicycle and it's a foot slot for like the majority of the game.
I think that's a really good analogy, Anthony. It's almost the arousing wave and the undertow stilettos kind of rolled into one because of the modality of a lot of the attacks that utilize tapping cogs. For instance, if you're coming in with the Cloud Skiff, is it going to be used for go again, or is it going to be used for plus one when it's really needed? When your opponent's down at one, I could see that effect being really debilitating in terms of like trying to block these effects out. Let's move now to the companion ally slot, a slot that is brand new to Mechanologist. Talk to me about the intricacies of Polycranka, because this card was seen as awesome from the second we saw its text. Honestly, even before that, we were just stoked that the bird had a name, that it wasn't Puffin, and that it was getting the treatment it deserved based on how awesome it was in the artwork. But now that you've played so many games on Puffin, I suspect that there is a lot of intricacies in the way you are actually supposed to deploy Poly, and it changes a lot, I would imagine, in different matchups.
Yes. Poly is kind of one of the most unique allies I think ever made because you always have essence to it and you can choose when to deploy it. It is half a card draw because it's going to be cranking and it is perch. So the physical heroes can't target it unless it comes off the perch and cranks. So knowing when to deploy Polycranka is really pivotal. Like I said before, like when I used to play with Crown of Dominion, it was kind of my get out of jail free card where I just drew a hand that didn't work. I could deploy the gold with from Crown of Dominion and then also use Poly as that card draw as my one get out of jail free card. But the Polycranka just has so many different use cases and so many different matchups. Against Wizard, you definitely want to deploy Polycranka as soon as you can, but you have to be super careful. So against Wizards, they can actually get around the perched ability by just shooting it with Arcane because it's still in the arena, so that people can still target it with stuff like any of the spells that say do 1 damage or X damage to any target. I've seen people like burn bear my Poly before, like throw 6 Arcane at it before I even get a turn. So like on them going first, they'll just burn bear my Poly because they can target it, and I don't even have a chance to deploy it. So against Wizards and like people that can target it without having to attack it, I would say play it out as soon as you can, but you also have to be careful because if you play it out, they can actually just respond to it and kill it right away, so you lose your action point. So you have to be very careful with Poly and when choosing when to deploy it. But against like the heroes that are like slower, say like Azalea, the decks that go super tall, like Azalea Guardian, this card is insane. Like they gotta spend like 7 damage to kill this thing, more often than not killing their turn as well because they don't have go again. Being able to Poly sinking like 7 damage is insane because it already drew you like one or more cards throughout the game, and it also ate an attack for you, likely with an on hit. that's like super above rate as to any ally because if they sink 7 damage into your ally, that means that you're getting a 5 card hand probably or a 4 card hand to boost them down with. So Polycranka is pretty insane in that regard. I think against heroes like Ninja, like Syndra, or like Assassin even, you kind of have to deploy it in the correct turn. So you can't just deploy willy nilly like you can against Guardians or Azalea or like really tall decks, where they have to sink a giant attack. You kind of have to choose your slot very carefully when you deploy it. You often want to kind of feel out what their turn's going to be. So say you kind of boost them down like zero to 60 boost, super hit boost, and you kind of get the feel like, oh my god, they want to keep all 5 cards or all 4 cards because they need to do a bunch of damage to me. At that point, I would deploy Polycranka because I would get a card draw if I can. I would never deploy Polycranka if I didn't get a card draw off it, or just to throw it out there as an ally, basically. But I would deploy Polycranka and draw a card there because now that I kind of get the feel that they're gonna use their 4 card hand to attack me, now I present them with the dilemma or like the illusionist dilemma of do you hit me or do you hit my ally? Because if you don't strip enough cards from my hand, I'm gonna use Polycranka next turn and crank again and draw another card. So presenting that really weird dilemma to them of do I hit you or do I hit Poly is really pivotal if you time it correctly.
Is there any particular fear going up against ninjas that are running Mask Momentum with Polycranka? I mean, are you being really careful about when you deploy it so that they can't get a free card draw off of it?
I would say not really, because the threat of Mask Momentum is always there against like Ira and Syndra. But more often than not, they can kind of you can kind of play around it because then they'll have to time it to where their attack for one is like the second attack because if they attack Poly for one to start, that's the first chain link, and then they attack you for the second chain link. You can kind of plan your turn accordingly to how to block Syndra or Ira, in fact. So it's really awkward for Ira, I guess, to do like Kadachi for one and then Kadachi for two against you because you could just block the Kadachi for two. Or against Syndra, if they spend a whole card, so say like they spend a whole card to attack with their Kunai Retribution into Poly, that's such a big boon to you because that's not another head jab at your face. So I think if you block well after Poly gets hit, it kind of mitigates it anyway. And them hitting Poly instead of you is always a good thing in an aggro matchup. There's basically wasting or spending one resource or card to hit you your bird instead of you. That's that much more closer for you to boost them down with.
So Polycranka good, as everyone
Super
kind of
good.
suspected. Let's talk about the chosen weapon here, Anthony. This was kind of hotly debated early on in Puffin's lifespan in this game. You, for example, when we spoiled Perk Up as part of the content creator spoiler season, we're leaning a lot more toward Cogworks Blunderbuss, if I remember correctly. What drew you back over to Spitfire?
Yeah, so initially why I thought Blunderbuss was so good was because in Dash IE for the longest time, leading off with your pistol before you boost them down is so good because they're never going to block the pistol. Because you do two Gogan into like a slew of attacks. They're never going to block the pistol. It's always 2 damage with Gogan for free. But Blunderbuss is really weird because you have to spend 2 resources and you have to have a cog to give a Gogan. So it's super awkward. In Spitfire, you do not need a pitch. And going pitchless in Puffin is super broken sometimes. Especially with how the deck kind of lines up with a bunch of 0 for 4s at times. Where you can just go like Sky Skimmer, 0 to 60 boost into Spitfire. It's just like so above rate. And this card works really well with Zeppelin because if you like curve out your turn really well, so say you play Zipper Hit into Zeppelin, and you haven't shot your Spitfire yet, and you have some cogs left over, you can actually hit with Zeppelin, make a cog to crank, and then now you have none floating, so you can't really do anything if you had Plasma Pistol. But if you have Spitfire, you can crank that cog you make off Zeppelin, and then now you can shoot Spitfire for two. So often Zeppelin is like a 2 card 10 sometimes because you can pump it up to 8, make that extra cog, and then shoot for an extra 2 damage with Spitfire without pitching another card, which like kind of goes crazy with the math. And then like in your worst case scenario, you can just tap 2 cogs to make it 3 with no pitch at all. So like sometimes you'll have cogs to set up for the turn, but you just need to block 12. So you block 12 and then you shoot for 3, which is like a 15 value turn, which is insane. Not having to pitch anything either.
Okay, let's move on to the main board of the list here, Anthony. We've already mentioned the natural includes as far as the boost cards. We've got our throttles, 0 to 60, zipper hits. This is looking just looking at those cards like a Dash IE list. Now let's move into the newer stuff from High Seas. Talk to me one by one about the cards that utilize cogs. Let's start, of course, with Cloud Skiff, and then we'll move directly over to Sky Skimmer, the commons.
Yeah, if you notice, so Skimmer and Cloud Skiff are basically zipper hit and 0 to 60 without boosting. If you have a cog out, so they're basically the same rate as those cards from Arcane Rising, which is super good. And if you have a cog out, you basically just got the same exact effect as 0 to 60 or zipper hit without having to banish it off the top of your deck. So they're just definitely auto includes just because they're so above rate. And like I said before, that was kind of the main draw of playing like the Megahertz script deck, where you would already naturally have the go again. So you would pump by one to kind of even go above the rate of the Arcane Rising cards, which is actually insane. But yeah, Skiff, super good. Just basically zipper hit. It's super modal. We can do a 1 for 6 instead of a 1 for 5 go again. And these are the cards that are like really big MVPs late game, where they're at like 1 to 3 health. And it's really scary for them to kind of block, depending on what mode you give Cloud Skiff, because if they're at 1 and you send Cloud Skiff for 5, they have to block 6. Because if they block for 5 exactly, you could just give it +1 and kill them. But if they block 6, then you could just make them lose 1 point of value and give it go again. So they're in a spot where they're screwed either way, basically. And they have to respect blocking 6. So it's a pretty good time when you have a Cloud Skip or a Sky Skimmer in hand, and it's pretty late game. Next card, Cog in the Machine. Probably the best card in the whole deck. This is the only way to get extra action points unless there's a specific card in the maybe sideboard later that we'll talk about. Unless you want to talk about it now, but
No, let's talk about it later.
okay, cool. We'll talk about it later, but this is the only way to get extra action points in Puffin at the moment. So when you make 2 golden cogs, you can crank both of them to get 2 action points. So it kind of refreshes its own action point and then another one if you want to. This is super good anytime in the game. So if you want to get an extra action point so that you can attack with one of the attack action cards and then shoot Spitfire after, it's good in that scenario. If you draw this on the first turn of the game, you could just slam down 2 cogs and not crank. And then it's also really good against anti-fatigue because you can always tap a cog if you have extra cogs. You can tap a cog to put this at the bottom. So you can kind of stack your deck to have some sort of turn later on too. I really like this card because you can kind of stack the deck with Palantir Aeronaut with Cog in the Machine. So like you can pitch an Aeronaut, play Cog in the Machine, and then tap a cog to put at the bottom, and then when your pitch goes under, you put the Palantir with a blue next to it. So late game, you have a cog in the machine, a blue, and Palantir, and you have your unicycle up. You could just naturally turn on Palantir Aeronaut late game at the expense of 3 cards, which is insane. So I can't speak about how good this card is. It's basically high octane. Not as broken as high octane, but it kind of fuels your deck with extra action points, the ability to turn on all your cog attacks, and also make golden cog. So it kind of is everything you need in a card itself.
Since you mentioned it there, Anthony, I want to go a little out of order and go to Palantir Aeronaut because you mentioned like a late game pitch stack where I think when everybody saw this card spoiled initially, the eyebrows go up at the thought of being able to kill your opponent's equipment, right? And that gets even more crazy when you read the specific text. But the scenario we're talking about now is late game. You don't necessarily have to target a piece of equipment with that Palantir Aeronaut thrice per turn instant. You could destroy a card that is blocking significantly more than that. So in this late game scenario, I kind of want you to talk really quickly about how Palantir Aeronaut can just inherently close games out.
Yes. So Palantir Aeronaut, if you read the text box, it is basically Tarantula Toxin, the card. And I've been calling for Tarantula Toxin to get banned for so long. A 0 for 6 is crazy. And this card is basically a 0 for 6, sometimes even more. At base, it could be a 0 for like 3 or 4 because you're destroying like an equipment if they don't block at all. But late game, this is so good because if they're at low health, they have to overblock by so much because it's coming in for 6. If they block 6, 6 damage is going to leak through because you'll destroy one of the 3 blocks. So if they block 9, 3 damage will leak through. So if they don't want to take any damage at all from Palantir Aeronaut, they actually have to block 12 with 4 cards because it'll pump to 9 and then it'll destroy a blocking card. So you have to kind of overblock and respect it so much late game when you're super low. And then really quick with the sideboard, it actually goes really well in tandem with a card in the sideboard that I put on that we'll talk a little bit more about later. It's Convection Amplifier. This card is so insane in this deck. Um, it gives your attack dominate, and there's two main targets in the deck. One of them being Palantir Aeronaut. You'll save a counter for late game, and you'll turn this on, and then you'll play Palantir with 3 cogs. Now they can only block with 1 card from hand, which is insane because dominates OP. And then more often than not, you could just pump it to 9 and then destroy the 1 card they blocked with. So basically, this in tandem with Aeronaut makes Aeronaut as a 2 card 9 for sure, which is insane. And my favorite thing to do with Aeronaut that a lot of people I feel like don't do is so if they look like they're gonna dereact and try to like bait you destroying the equipment. If you don't think destroying the equipment is very good in this scenario, say it's like blade break and it's gonna break anyway, and you think they're like feinting a dereact, you can actually pump it by 2 and then just pass priority. So you'll go to 8. They'll probably take 6 or 7 damage because it's blade break 1 or 2, and then you'll just hold the effect if they dereact. So this is really good against like Florian and whatnot, because if they think you're gonna break their equipment, say it's like they block with well grounded, you'll just pass and you'll say, okay, take 8 damage then. They'll probably play Rootbound Carapace or something. They'll still get the decompose, but then you can pop your last cog to destroy the Rootbound Carapace, and now you just basically destroyed their 4 block. So there's a lot of ways to play with Palantir that is really cool, and I'd like to see more people kind of hold that third instant. A lot of people jump the gun and they're like, I'm gonna destroy well grounded. I'm gonna destroy a 0 like Mage Master boots or something. But more often than not, it doesn't really swing the matchup that much if you destroy that equipment piece. So holding it at 2 and then waiting for that third one can mean like 5 more damage more often than not.
There's even another scenario that I want to talk about here, Anthony, and it's got a personal note to it. We did a show match of Pham versus Puffin towards the tail end of our Nationals weekend. Can you take me down memory lane and remind me exactly how that particular Palantir Aeronaut went down?
Yes. So it also goes in tandem with another card in the sideboard. It is T-Bone. Shout out to Bright Lights. Any card with a bike on it is broken. Actually, this is Everfest, I think. But any card with a bike on it is broken. So T-Bone is actually really cool because you'll make them put armor onto the equipment chain, and if you T-Bone Palantir Aeronaut, you can actually destroy any defending card any defending card throughout the turn if the chain's still active. So say they block with Valiant Dynamo, which Bryce did on an earlier chain link to get the value off because Fang is so pog, Value Town Fang, you gotta block the Dynamo, reset it next turn. He didn't think much about blocking with Dynamo early in the chain, and then I slammed down a Palantir, and I was able to pump it all the way to thrice per turn, and then I destroyed the Valiant Dynamo on the previous chain link because it's still defending on this chain link. So not only did he lose and take damage off the +3, he actually lost his most pivotal equipment piece that he thought was super safe earlier in the chain.
And I had blocked with my Grains of Blood Spill in order to kind of bait out that Palantir Aeronaut ability, and so I lost that as well.
Yes. This is the real equipment destroying piece. We thought Jarl was the one with Mangle and Crumble to Eternity. This is the real equipment destroying deck. I think the other day I played against Jarl and I destroyed all of his equipment before he got a -1 counter on one of mine, which is pretty funny.
That's diabolical. Okay, we jumped out of order there because you mentioned the interaction of Cog in the Machine and Palantir Aeronaut, so I thought that was pretty appropriate. Let's go back to another unbelievably powerful card, Cogworks Dovetail.
Yes. If you use this with the Convection Amplifier as well, it is insane. It basically makes this card into a 1 for almost like 10 because you can give it +2 and go again with Dominate, guarantee that it hits with the Dominate, and then reset all 3 cogs or X amount of cogs to be able to keep going with with the rest of your attack. So Dovetail is so insane. Like this is the card you have to respect. Where someone plays a Dovetail with 3 cogs out, you have to block 7 or 8 and just not let them get that value unless your hand does 30 damage or something. If you let Dovetail hit and the cogs reset, it's just so insane the value you get. It's actually worse if you block for like 5, not knowing what the card does. I played against a couple people that didn't know they knew Dovetail was a really good card after reading it, but they kind of blocked like 6, not 7, basically not 7 at all. They would block 6, and then I would pump it twice and then give it go again. 1 damage leaks through, and then all the cogs reset anyway. So knowing how to block this card is super pivotal. And then you're super happy with it anyway if they block 8 or 7, because if they block 7 or 8, you'll just give it Gogan, and then you'll save 2 cogs, 3 cogs for the next attack down the line. So this is kind of one of those cards where it's lose lose for them, depending on how they block. You can only really counter this with like a D react. I remember one night I was playing against Colin on Kasai, and I played Dovetail for with 3 cogs up, so I can pump it to 7 and give it go again. And he blocks for 3, and we sit there and we did like the math on which he had to D-react, and we like did all the math to see what the best scenario was. I get blown out if I give it +2 and go again, and he D-reacts because I get no cogs basically. So we did the math out. Turns out that the best scenario is if he does have a D-react, I give it +1 for my Dovetail. Because if he doesn't have a D-react, the +1, giving it +1 and go again, and losing out on that third cog, which you could have gave it +1, is the best math. If he doesn't have a D-react, but if he does have a D-react, you don't get blown out as hard by giving it +1. So there's like a fun mini game where if they do have a D-react, you have to decide whether or not you're gonna give it the plus damage or just like be happy with it being for a 1 for 5 go again. So there's a lot of tricks with this card. I really like it. It's probably the second best card behind Palantir Aeronaut, being like a zipper hit baseline. And it kind of feels those really powerful turns where you have 3 cogs. If they disrespect this card, your damage multiplies by so much.
We already talked about early, young Puffin players, shall we say, jumping the gun on the Palantir Aeronaut ability. Can we talk about the interaction specifically? Like, why don't you have to give it go again early on? And why can you withhold that part of the ability until after the hit?
Yeah, so being a Riptide player myself, being able to defend with D-Reacts and have them trigger like +1 ability, or sorry, go again abilities like Frailty Trap and whatnot, obviously super pivotal. And all these attacks get around that with Skiff, Skimmer, and Dovetail because you can give it go again in damage step. And Dovetail is especially cool because you can layer the effects in damage step however you want. So say you have 2 cogs. If they block for an amount where 7 would leak through, or if you pump it to 7, 1 damage will leak through, or X damage will leak through. You can actually give it tap both cogs that you have to give it +2, and then it hits in damage step. In damage step, you layer it so that the cogs untap first, and then once the cogs untap, you tap 1 cog to give it go again in damage step still. So you come out of it being able to untap your cogs and also give it go again. So that's why this card is so insane, because you can manipulate the damage if you don't have enough cogs. And then give it go again in damage step and just continue your turn that way. Similar to stuff like Cloud Skiff and Sky Skimmer. Do not give it go again in reaction against Riptide. You will get collapsing trapped. Just wait until damage. In damage, give it go again. Just like Pathway Travel and all that before it's time.
Spitting wisdom out here, Anthony. Let's move on to Cogwork Zeppelin, which I think, yes, is the only full cycle in the entirety of the deck. You got reds, yellows, and blues. Why is it so good?
So this card is just cracked. Like, it is the best of the non-Majestics, I would say. And that's why I ran 9 of them, because it's kind of like the glue for the deck, where, besides Copper Cog, obviously, if I could run 30 Zeppelins and 30 Copper Cogs. I would call it a day. So it says when this hits a hero, you can tap a cog you control and then create a golden cog. So this is better than Steamboat because Steamboat is not as modal where you can only give a steam counter to a current cog you control if you tap one. This is more modal because you can crank that cog you make to keep your turn going and shoot Spitfire if you really wanted to. It also does the same thing as Steamboat, where you can just not crank that cog and then keep it for next turn. But I really like this card because if it hits, you've only cranked 1 this turn, so you've only played 1 copper cog, you can actually let Zeppelin hit, crank the cog you make, and then now it counts as the second cog you made for the turn. The second crank you've done for the turn. So you'll draw a card. Likely it'll go into Arsenal, or you can, if it's a 0 cost, you can boost it away. You can keep your turn going, and then you can shoot Spitfire after with the extra cog that you just cranked. So this card is super modal. It kind of like acts as one of the Majestics in the rare slot, so that's why I have 9 of. I think moving forward, maybe I would cut down the yellows, maybe some of the blues, just because I feel like I was super high on this card before Nats. Just because of its on-hit ability, but there's probably better cards in the blue slot, like more Copper Cogs maybe, or maybe better attacks. in the red slot as well, or sorry, in the as opposed to the yellow slot. But this
Mm.
card is kind of basically everything you want out of a rare, right? It's kind of a cog maker, a way to manipulate damage, and then also it's pseudo go again, which like you can with cranking the cog off the card's ability. So it kind of does everything you want it to. It's kind of like its own makeshift dovetail in a way where you can kind of be super modal with it depending on how your opponent blocks.
That rounds out all of the cog buffing attacks, but let's talk about this kind of what a lot of people would think is draft chaff that has made its way into this Nationals level deck. It's Goldwing Turbine, both in the red and the blue.
Yes, this is possibly the best worst card in the deck, I would say. So this is sort of the card you have to run because you need a critical mass of golden cogs, or sorry, cogs in general. And it also is a buff, so it helps that. It sucks that it costs two. I feel like this should cost one, and it would be super freaking good in this deck. But in the fact that it costs two, it makes your pitch curve so weird because of all your Zeppelins and all your Palantir Aeronauts. So you have to have Tunic, or you have to like boost an attack, then use Tackle Foundry Heart, and then play Goldwing Turbine into like Aeronaut. If it costs a one, this card would be a slam dunk. But the fact that it costs two is kind of awkward. Um, the fact that it's a buff combined with a cog making is kind of what you want because it kind of fuels your Majestics. So this in tandem with like Palantir Aeronaut or Dovetail is really good because it kind of gives you the cog, one out of three cogs for the ability, and also buffs the attack for the on hit. So being able to hit with Dovetail is insane. Being able to hit with Zeppelin's insane because it kind of keeps your turn going. So just for the fact that it buffs the attack and makes a golden cog, it's good enough to place in the deck. I just wish it costed one, but I guess I understand why it costed two. I guess if this is an assassin card, it definitely costs zero, so that kind of sucks. But we won't get into the assassin love too much here.
Yeah, and I think anybody who has played with a really cracked, or I should say cranked, Puffin limited deck knows that hitting a critical mass of Goldwing Turbine really can cause some dummy things to happen, especially because, like you've been talking about the entirety of this video, each card that creates a cog or is a cog in its own right equals half of a card. So +3 plus half of a card, yeah, that's probably what justifies this two cost in this common.
Yeah, I mean it definitely is good with like the one cost attack. So like stuff like Skiff, Dovetail, where you can play out a copper cog, pitch a blue to play Goldwing Turbine, draw a card for either next turn to set up, or your current turn if it works out that way, and then play like a 1 for 5. And then now it goes to like 1 for 8. You can give it go again, and then with the go again, you can shoot your Spitfire for two. So it's like super good in that regard. Like I said, just wish it costed less. To kind of fit out the curve of the deck. If it costs one, it'd be great. If it costs zero, it'd be broken. Just kind of the glue you need to kind of round out the deck and make some more cogs for you.
Moving on, I think that covers the majority of the high seas stuff. We'll go over Cogworks Workshop in a moment, but I do want to touch on the bright lights, I guess I should say, just representative in the deck. It's red soup up. I think this, for me, was like kind of the way I was trying to build Puffin, at least early on before we had all the cards. I was leaning a lot into galvanize effects, namely because one of the first cards we saw was Golden Skywarden, so I kind of assumed that Puffin was going to be this very, I guess your first iteration of the deck, super mid-rangey, very good on defense. I know like you were partially interested in, like, for example, infused titanium and some of those other mainstays from Bright Lights. Why is this the only one that made the cut?
Yeah, so Galvanize is a defensive mechanic where this deck is very proactive and like offensive leaning. So I never really want to resolve the Galvanize, but in the case that I want to, this is a 0 for 4 both ways. So it'd be a 0 for 4 on my turn if I decide to attack with it, and then it'd be a 0 for 4 on defense if I really need to block like a Leave No Witness and whatnot. So this and like Steel Street Hoons are probably the two best ones because they're actually converting on offense as well. There's some cool stuff with like the cogs you can do. So say like you can't convert this card into 4 block on defense. So you want to convert on offense, but none of your cogs are gonna die. You can actually let one of your cogs die. So all the cogs, all like the crank items, it says it's an optional thing. Unless you remove a steam counter. So you can decide I'm not gonna remove a steam counter. I'll let it die. You can let the item die and then Super will get go again. if you don't need the cog for the turn. So there's some pretty cool scenarios with it, but I just include in the deck because it's a 0 for 4 both ways. It's just too good not to have, I think, and you have like a critical mass of cogs or items to put it on board. So this card is basically always going to be 4 value. And that's why it made its way into the deck. Not running the other galvanized cards like a tough old wrench or teeth of the cog or infused titanium because those are only good if you block. And I don't really ever want to block with this deck if my deck is humming. Like I want to be able to convert my cards into damage over and over and over. And if I'm spending my turn blocking with like super underrate cards if I don't have an item, it's just not a good time. I think it could have more place in the mid range deck if you're trying to eke out value of like blocking 4 over and over. But in this deck, you just want to be able to go ham. So Soup Up comes in because it's 0 for 4 on offense.
Okay, last card in the main board here, Anthony, Cogworks Workshop.
My background.
Anthony's in the Cogworks Workshop right now.
I am I am in the workshop. There's the giant cog right there. This card is pretty good in blue. Like it's just super good. It makes a cog. It keeps your cogs around. It's everything you want. It blocks 3, so it's an auto include. It's basically the next best thing behind copper cog, and it actually blocks as well. So it's another cog generator. That I would say I wish this card cost 0, but I get why it costs 1. I just wish some of these cards costed less. But this card curves out really well. Like if this is the example I give the Goldwing Turbine, because if Goldwing Turbine costed 1, it would fit so well with the cost curve, like Cogworks Workshop does. So like you can play this off Palantir as well. So if you play Copper Cog, pitch another blue to play Cogworks Workshop. Now you have 2 cogs that will stay around for next turn as well. And then now you can turn on your like Palantir if you use Unicycle and whatnot, draw that extra card as well. So Cogworks is just kind of like a really good blue that is probably an auto include in all the different decks, just because it blocks 3 as well.
All right, moving on to the sideboard, and it's not a whole lot here, Anthony, because you did go ahead and go over that 8 equipment slots that you normally like, especially when you're building first versions of the deck. So we've only got 10 sideboard slots here, which probably makes it a pretty nice, clean deck to pilot at a tournament. Let's go by the numbers. We got Backup Protocol Red here.
Yes, this card is good because it says crank on it, half a card draw, and then you get back if you're blue flooded, you can actually get back all of your good attacks. So say you have a hand full of blues that don't really convert well, you can actually crank Backup Protocol, crank a Copper Cog, draw another card, and then use any extra blues to go get Palantir, to go get Dovetail, whatever attack fits best for your turn. I initially put this card in the deck. I was like, wow, you can get Conquer the High Seas back, but it only says mech cards, unfortunately. So if any of you are getting Conquer the High Seas back off of your Backup Protocol Red, you have been cheating. Be warned. Do not do that in a tournament. Although it seems super cool because you spend the 2 and you have like another blue, so you have like if it curves out well, you're spending 6 resources to play Conquer the High Seas, which is insane. But you legally cannot do that. Conquer the High Seas is a pirate card, not a mech card.
Play legally, says Anthony Pham. Next up is Convection Amplifier, which we've touched on a little bit, but you want to sing any more praises about it?
It is my best sideboard card, I would say. Like it is everything you want against those decks that want to block you out late game. Like I said, if you can give Convection Amplifier, or you can give Dominate to like a Dovetail or like a Palantir late game. It is just so much free damage that they're just like forced into a really bad spot, because if they like end their turn with no arsenal, or like it's not a defense reaction, you're basically guaranteeing that Aeronaut is gonna push damage or Dovetail is gonna hit, which in turn leads to like 3 more value at the very minimum. So giving stuff Dominate late game, I don't think it's ever been more relevant than this one. Like I guess before in Dash.io you could give your Max V Dominate with like some boom grenades out, but this is like way easier to set up because you're just like naturally drawing into a card that you can play outright without having to like boost 3 times or whatever. So I feel like this is like the best Convection Amplifier deck like ever. I would definitely consider running 2 of these if I could, just to kind of play those slower matchups with like inevitability that my Dovetail or my Palantir Aeronaut will get its full value.
Yeah, speaking on that subject, what do you think is the hardest kind of archetype for this deck to deal with? Is it the slower matchups?
I think it's the matchups that kind of push the in-between, where it's enough to block you out to where you can't just boost willy-nilly, but also presents enough damage to kill you. So stuff like the Assassins are really hard because you kind of have to worry about their on hits and like they're doing deck damage because you're blocking so much, while also being able to block pretty well with like defense reactions and whatnot. Something like Tao Tao's Mario build, I could see definitely being very hard. That's probably the hardest matchup I would say. Decks that are like super slow, stuff like Florian and Verdant, they give you a little bit more time to set up. So this is where Convection Amplifier can definitely shine a lot because you can kind of get that extra space to be able to play down an item and like pass a turn after you played a couple attacks. And then use that to eke out that extra value late game where they at max can block like maybe like 5 or 6 with their chess piece and like a non-attack from hand, the Earth one, to make an embodiment of Earth. But 6 is not enough to stop a Dovetail from hitting or a Palantir from getting its full value. So I can't sing high enough about how good this card is. People should definitely be running this card in Boost Puffin at the very least, maybe even in mid-range Puffin, just because it works so well with Dovetail and Palantir.
Next up is T-Bone, but that has a bike on it, so we automatically know that it's a good card. Talk to me about
Already
Golden
good.
Skywarden, which is 100% relegated to the sideboard for you.
Yes. So, like I said, this card is super good because it turns on your hero ability and it converts those extra cogs into gold, which you can convert into cogs later on and have a card draw if it lines up. So, at the very best, if they attack you and you use all your cogs to get the full block value, card is absolutely insane. But like I said before, in Boost Puffin, I don't want to be blocking. I don't want to be relegated to be blocking. If I want to be able to do proactive things with my hand, at the very best, Golden Skywarden is a 4 for 7, which is like super below rate, and I want to be able to convert my blues in my hand to like they're copper cogs, so I want to put them on the field. So often I don't want to be pitching over 3 pitch any turn at any point in the game. So I don't really want to use this on offense because it's super below rate. I don't ever want to be blocking, so it's relegated to the sideboard because it comes in for those matchups where I do have to block sometimes. So stuff like Assassin, going tall against Ranger is really important. So I put it against Azalea because you can block a dominated attack with Golden Skywarden, break all your cogs, and block an ungodly amount. It's good against Prism because it's block 7, and it's also yellow. So if they play Library and you happen to draw 2 Golden Skywardens or Golden Skywarden and Zeppelin, Yellow Zeppelin, you can break their library. Or you can also just draw 5 cards, which is pretty insane if you pitch the 2 yellows too.
Okay. Next,
So good.
and certainly not least, is 2 copies of Jolly Bludger.
Mm-hmm. So this card is the most broken card into the least amount of heroes. So if any heroes, if they know you're on boost, this card gets a lot worse because they'll probably not play any items into you. But if they don't know you're on boost, if they think you're mid range, some decks might actually play items into you. So like Verdants, they might like try to pitch stack you. Or sorry, like item stack you. So Jolly Bludger would be able to steal all of these. But the main or steal all of those items. But the main, I think, boon of playing this card is against like stuff like Gravy Bones or Fellow Pirates or Victor, where they play a lot of gold. You can attack with this, give it overpower, and then pump it all the way to 8, and then steal all their gold. And then you don't have to run like Crown of Dominion or anything. You just basically took all their gold, and then now you can use it for your own turn. So this is why I say this is the best card against the smallest amount of heroes, because there's only a few heroes it's really good against. And even then, it might not be good against if they sideboard out all the items or gold generation. But in the fact that they don't, this card is so broken because it steals all of their gold generation and their like engine piece, and then kind of puts it on your side. And it's just a good generic attack as well with essentially overpower, which is dominate to a lot of heroes.
And that rounds out Anthony's Puffin Boost US Nats 2025 deck list. Last question before we move on to a little mini story time about your matchups that you experienced at US Nationals. Is this, even though this deck is boosting, it's not running nearly as high of a density as what we think of as a normal boost deck. I mean, you compare this to a traditional boost -IE deck or any -IO deck, and the number of boost cards is significantly lower. That being said, does this deck have to worry about decking itself out like those other 2 mechanologists that hinge primarily on the boost mechanic?
Yeah, so I guess this is like a kind of a 2-parter. So I don't want people to know that boost is probably the best way. I want to say that boost is personally my favorite way to play Puffin, just because it converts the cards very well. It converts your hero ability well. Everything kind of molds together, and you convert your hands way easier than the mid-range one or the combo one. But I want people to know that mid-range Puffin and Pirate Puffin are a thing because it helps in sideboarding. It kind of keeps that ambiguity of what you're going to play, kind of like the old Dash IE. But the reason everyone always says, why would you play Boost Puffin over something like Dash IO? And the main reason is one, the sideboarding, where they might think you're mid range. But two, you have so many different tools to combat fatigue, and you're not always full boosting. So you have all of like the cog attacks that are really good against fatigue because you're not spending a card from deck to be able to get go again and whatnot. So stuff like Skiff, Dovetail, Sky Skimmer, Soup Up, all those are just straight up go again under certain scenarios. So you're not doing deck damage to get go again or free action points back. And you have really good anti-fatigue stuff like Cog in the Machine. You have, like I said before, Convection Amplifier. So Dash IO can technically run all these cogs as well, but she's just so much better with boost because of her hero ability and being able to cheat out extra action points. I think also the card advantage you get from Puffin also allows you to play item hands a lot better than Dash IO because more often than not, Dash IO can't really convert all the items really well, like those awkward hands. Whereas Puffin, if she draws two Copper Cogs, that's actually a really good turn because you can just Copper Cog, sets up all your attacks, and then you also draw another card off the top of your deck. So you're just super happy playing Puffin, I think, when you're item flooded and when you're not item flooded, which is a super cool boon to the deck.
Before we move on, Anthony, any honorable mentions for cards that you would have liked to include but just didn't quite make the cut? I'll drag us down to that maybe board to refresh your memory.
Yes, so I put in just a couple of maybe cards that I was thinking about to kind of make it cleaner. Perk up, obviously, one of the ones where if you have extra gold, this turns into a free card draw itself. It's probably the best out of all the buffs. But I didn't see myself making a lot of gold, so I didn't include it. The two cards I really want to emphasize that I'll probably put in my deck moving forward, maybe, is going to be Steel Street Hoons in the blue. So this one's basically the 3-cost version of Soup Up, where it's galvanized for 4. But if you're like blue flooded, you can let a cog die, and this becomes a 3 for 5. I always say that 2, 5, and 8 are always the most awkward numbers to block in Flesh and Blood because innately, if you're trying to block 3, these are all the ones where they have to overblock if you. They have to overblock if they're presenting 3 blocks. So if this comes in for 5, it's super good because if they dereact for 4, they take 1 damage. If they overblock for 6, they lose 1 value. So attacking for 2, 5, or 8, always super good in these decks that are like attacking very often. And then the other card that I really want to mention is Heist. This card is so insane if you run so many Copper Cogs. It is the other way, like I mentioned before, to cheat out action points if it hits. Unfortunately, it's a little bit below rate, and it also is a lot of deck damage, and I wanted to keep the boost to a minimum, just because I want all my attacks to be above rate if I am boosting, and I don't want to do a lot of deck damage, because if I'm boosting too often, I'm going to lose all my power cards, like Cog in the Machine, Palantir, or Dovetail, just to incidental boost. But this is kind of a way to kind of get around more action points, because if they let Heist hit, and you have a critical mass of Copper Cogs, there's a high chance you're going to probably boost some of these Copper Cogs. So if Heist hits, you can actually put a Copper Cog into the field. You can crank it and get an extra action point because you have to go again from Heist, and you can get an extra action point from cranking the Copper Cog. It kind of powers your turn, gives you a Cog in the field for whatever you want to do, like Sky Skiff or Cloud Skiff or Dovetail or Palantir, and get you an extra action point so you can like end with a gunshot for Spitfire if you really want to too. So this is definitely an MVP. If this said when it hits, I would definitely include it in the deck because it has use case against Gravy Bones and like ally decks. But the fact that it says hits a hero, it's a little bit of a below rate card. Even though it attacks for 5, it is spending 2 resources and a card from deck. So it's just not like it's like boost card number 5 that I want in the deck, and unfortunately, I'm only running 4.
Okay, Anthony, let's go ahead and move to your tournament run in Las Vegas. We only have 1 day to speak of. We could talk about your draft run, but that seems like a bit of a sore subject, so we'll leave that in the skeleton closet for the time being. But you did have a very solid CC run on that first day. There was 4 wins and 1 loss. The one loss, of course, was the one where you were on coverage, and you got not only high rolled intensely by Evan Set, who resolved 2 red Malefic incantations on turn 1, but you also low rolled and received the tempo a couple times, one of which you had an all red hand and just couldn't convert. Nevertheless, you put on a masterclass of how to kind of starve Vincent out, and you really did a good job on defense, despite the fact that that is just not what your deck wants to be doing. So go ahead and run me through your tournament run, and how you're feeling about the deck in general after that day one.
Just to preface, I did bet. So I made a bet with Austin, who did the deck tech before with Gravy Bones. I told them that we're both going to be playing 15 rounds of our heroes because I'm going to be forcing Puffin in draft, and he's going to be forcing Gravy Bones. It definitely worked out for him a lot better. My unfortunately my day one draft was 0-3 on a Puffin deck. There was a scurv in the pod. It was all messed up. There was 3 Puffins. My deck was definitely the worst out of the
Ugh.
3. So unfortunately, my Nats run ended, but my CC run was a lot of fun. Playing the deck for the first time in paper, basically. Um, all of it had been like tile shard practice with the teammates before, so playing the deck in paper, it felt super fun. I thought that my matchup spread was actually really bad. I was like, all these decks are really bad for Puffin. Like I was gonna play Syndra, and Syndra would like be super good into these decks, but I was like, I don't want to play that against Dash IO. I don't want to play against Azalea. Vincent seems really hard, and like Kasai seems like she outvalues me, but it turns out like the deck was just humming all day. It was kind of like doing the thing that I expected it to do, where you just put so much damage on the board that it's kind of really hard to deal with, and it has those really critical sideboard pieces that really help in those matchups. So I guess going into the first matchup, I played against a Dash IO. And it was like super funny because the first thing he said to me was like, I have literally never played against Puffin, which is like already step one of like, this is going to be a good time
Hmm.
because he's going to be reading like Zeppelin, Dovetail, and all that. It's going to be like, it's going to be super hard to play against if you don't know like what Puffin is capable of. But it was really cool. But it was really cool because he also plays mech, so he kind of knows what I'm trying to do in terms of damage. And that game was so explosive. I think it was 4 turns, and they were able to resolve 2 max Vs, one of which was comboed with a red boom grenade, and I
Whoa.
still outdamaged them, just like doing the Palantir combo.
Whoa.
And just like boost Palantir, boost Palantir, and it outdamaged double max V, which is absolutely insane.
That calls to mind like an early conversation that we had about Puffin specifically when we were trying to figure out what is the archetype where she shines. And we were like, there's no way that it's a combination of items and boost because Dash.io just does that better. But in this case, you've kind of shown that you certainly can win the day trying to do what is a similar strategy.
Yeah, it's just being proactive. I think that's the best way to play Puffin, just because she already has card advantage innately on her hero ability. And if you're able to always convert that extra card into either setup for next turn or damage on your current turn, it's just the easiest way to play Puffin because the value is just always straight up there, and you're always getting value off that card draw. Whereas if you're playing like a more mid-range Puffin, it definitely has its good matchups, and it's like a lot slower and better into certain matchups. It just cannot convert that extra card well more often than not. So like if you're drawing your block cards in areas where you don't want to draw a block card and you need an attack, it's just often super crippling and like turns the tempo so well. Whereas in Boost Puffin in like this aggressive version, if you're going for that card draw, more often than not you're drawing like a 0 to 60, a Sky Skimmer, a Soup Up, a Throttle, whatever it is, you can convert on that turn right away. And that extra card draw often leads to like 3 to 6 more damage just because it's a card off the top of your deck that you're gonna play right away.
So moving on to the two Azalea matchups, why did you feel uncomfortable into Azalea, and what helped you get there in the end?
Yeah, so knowing going into Azalea, I knew that New Horizon Azalea was going to be a really big thing here at this Nats. So I definitely had the extra T-bones in my sideboard to help out with that, to be able to strip that equipment and kind of get them down to 0 equipment. Makes their deck way worse if they built their deck around having 2 arsenal slots. So I thought that was going to be really hard matchup anyway because it's hard for you to you kind of need extra action points and a lot of action points to be able to make cogs and also attack. So the only way you get around dominate is if you already have existing cogs and then they play red in the ledger, then you can use that like one really big attack like Zeppelin or Palantir, and then you can use the existing cogs to do that extra damage. But it kind of creates really small windows for you to attack. So that's why Azalea is kind of a weird matchup where your cog making and your cog attacking cards have to line up in a certain order between their red and the ledgers to make it good. Because if you're sitting there without any cogs and they attack you with red in the ledger and you have like a cog in the machine in your hand and also the attack, you won't get any value out of the cogs because you spent your one action making cogs rather than attacking. So that's kind of like that weird scenario that in between with like the combo deck where you kind of have to find these small windows to play. But in these 2 games, I just went so crazy with T-Bone. I think the first game and turn two, they had no equipment left, which is absolutely insane because they had Blade Break on three of different equipment. They had the New Horizon Sea Lace Sarong tunic, and I think their glove slot was long draw half glove. And I did like a double T-bone into Palantir Aeronaut. So like I broke two of their Blade Break equipment, and then I used Aeronaut to destroy their defending long draw half glove. And then later
Oh.
on in the game, they only had New Horizon left, and they double arsenal, and they hit me with Rend the Ledger with like a Ponder effect. And I played. My one action for the turn was T-Bone Boost, so it was it destroyed their New Horizon. So it was basically a CNC for three, which is hilarious. Destroying the destroying their last equipment piece. They had no equipment left after turn. I think it was three actually. And it was funny because after that, all their ponders are like, I'm not gonna arsenal. I can't arsenal. I might lose. So I'm just keep the card in my hand. And I felt really bad because I played so much Puffin, the mid range Puffin. I felt super bad like getting that extra card. I'm like, yep, can't arsenal that. It's got to stay in the hand just in case I brick. And basically the same thing happened in game two where I was able to break all the armor, makes the deck a lot worse. And if they miss it all, I think they did like an endless arrow for 17. And I was like, I'm just going to take this all. Like, there's no on hits that I care about. And I'm just going to convert my hand into like 25 damage. So um, the the foot was definitely on the gas for the first three games. Like I drew super hot. All the cogs lined up to where I make the cogs first, then I draw into the cog attacks, and that's always the best order because if you do it in the opposite way, you just play like really below rate attacks into like hands that don't do any damage. So if it's ever flipped where you make the cogs first, then do a bunch of damage, Puffin's one of the most broken decks in the game.
Honestly, even being on the receiving end of turns like that, despite the fact that I'm feeling rather sad about taking massive train-like hits, it does seem like one of the most fun decks to pilot that I've seen in a long time.
It's like an aggro illusionist almost, where you're converting all these very aggressive mech cards, but you have this board state of cogs that you have to manipulate. So it feels like you're playing an ally deck, but your allies are cogs that you're tapping, which is kind of cool. Also, specifically for this matchup, it's really good to learn about like the plus one or the go again and damage step because you get around tar pit trap. So being able to play around tar pit trap by giving it go again and damage step so you're out of the reaction phase is always super good. So it guarantees your Zeppelin hitting, it guarantees your dovetail hitting. Just make sure you're giving it go again and damage.
And specifically not in resolution, thanks to that recent rule change.
Yes, yes. Shout out to the rules being changed. I know I got so used to doing stuff in resolution because of the old game, or the old rules, and now that swapped to damage and then resolution, I unfortunately said I'll bounce something in resolution, and you cannot do that. So I unfortunately lost the ability to do that, and it was a really I think critical point in the game in an Aurora mirror match against Lupine. But it was a fun game nonetheless. But it kind of sucked that my tournament run kind of felt like it ended because I said the wrong thing.
Yeah, semantics in card games really can be crippling if you don't use them exactly right. So learn from Anthony's mistake. Do everything in damage step. Don't go to
Damage.
resolution. You want
Not
to
let
say
stuff resolve, you know.
yeah? You want to say anything else about round four, or have we covered that already?
No, it was a really good game. It was funny. I know his last name. I think it was Philip. Sorry if I'm not remembering your name. I know your last name. I know your last name, but I don't want to, dox you or anything. So I'll just say Philip because I think your name's Philip. Shout out to Philip. He actually played me in the call, or he was next to me in the calling Portland, and we were both Dash IO at the time. And I gave him a fucking boost sleeve, and then he like messaged me after the event. He's like, "Yo, I think I remember playing next to you. Is this one of your sleeves that you gave out?" And it was like the fucking boost sleeve, and I was like, "Oh my god, yes, it is." So it was pretty cool that I played like against a fellow Dash IO or a fellow Dash believer. But it was a super tight game. I mean, I know that the game turned out to where it was a very like one-sided game. I feel like for the most part, and it was actually really cool because you can kind of see the Puffin deck operate when it's behind the game and how it has catch-up mechanics. If a couple of those hands convert better when I'm able to grab the tempo, it can definitely showcase how rigid the deck can be when it's blocking, and then how it can turn the gas on in like the blink of an eye. Where if you get tempo, you can throttle boost, super hit boost into like Palantir with some cogs. So I think it's cool to showcase what the deck can do when it's on the receiving end of like an onslaught, I guess you could say. It's just unfortunate that it wasn't there for one of the games where I was giving out the onslaught.
Round 5, Kasai. You thought you were going to get outvalued, but that just didn't seem to be how it went.
This was actually one of the longest game that I played of the day. I believe the gentleman I played against said that he knew what Puffin did, but he was just reading all the cards to make sure. So I'm not sure if it was a feint or not. But it was a really cool game. He was playing Draw Swords Kasai, so it was a little bit more of an aggro matchup. And going into that, I kind of had to shift because I played so much against Colin, knowing his deck a little bit more defensive. I had to shift the game plan going aggressive. So I was often trying to get the most value out of my block cards, blocking in the right scenarios because I don't want to buff Centauri Saber in the wrong spots or give Hot Streak Gogan in the wrong spots. So stuff like Cogworks Workshop did a lot of work. Bullwing Turbine did a lot of work because it's blocking for 3 and not buffing that attack. So knowing how to block and when to block against Aggregate is really important to deny like the gold, just as it's important to them. For you to make gold, it's important for them to kind of power their turn. This is one of the matches where I put Jolly Bludger in and he blocked it both times because he didn't let me steal the gold. So it was a super fun matchup all along. I think it came down to the end game and it was super close, and I eventually eked out too much damage. It was funny because I made the call that his arsenal was not a buff, because if it was a buff, I lose on the spot, but I couldn't play towards that. And then it was not a buff. It turns out it was snag, so I ended up winning the game because he didn't have a buff in hand and he had another snag in his hand and he couldn't block my attacks for enough. So super close game, super fun.
An incredible poker hand, or a bluff to have in your arsenal against a mechanologist. Snag.
I was like, this is either the third in the swing and I lose, or it's a card you can't use and you didn't use it the turn before. So I'm gonna say no blocks and hope it's not in the swing that you kind of rope me on. And it turns out it was a snag. So thank goodness.
Anthony Pham, always a king at playing the game to win and not to not lose. Congratulations on the short but successful tournament run. I can speak firsthand and say that this deck is very real, and Anthony is the guy to put together the 80 and get you having a lot of fun with Puffin. Anthony, thank you so much for your time and for rocking up this deck tech video. I think you've definitely put together exactly how to play Puffin, both at the beginner level and at something more advanced, approaching professional, shall we even say. Any last parting words about Puffin?
Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong way to play Puffin. You play Puffin however you want. I personally just like Boost because I think naturally that's how I like to play. I like to be the aggressor. Like I said, if you're playing Pirate Puffin, so be it. You're playing some cool cards, Sunken Treasure, C4 Salvage, but in the end, nothing will ever beat Red Zipper Hit. That card's so broken.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Keep Red Zipper Hit in no matter what iteration of Puffin you're playing. I'm just kidding. If you're playing Anthony's Puffin Boost deck, definitely have Red Zipper Hit in there. Anthony's deck will be available on the Arcane Games and Events Fabrary profile, so you can go ahead and hit that up. The link will also be below in this video. Anthony, where can people find you if they want more of you?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm also on Twitter. Both handles should be Foxmain or Real Foxmain. You can also find me on Discord. If you're in the Age channel, definitely join our Discord. And you can at me at any time. I believe my name's Anthony on that one as well. So you can talk to me anytime. I always love talking to people about the game in general, not just mech. So yeah, hit me up anytime you guys want. You can always at me in like the public purple Discord too as well if you'd like. I know the recent stirrings in the Puffin purple Discord have been crazy, but you can always send me a DM if it gets too hectic in there.
Next up for Arcane Games and Events is an AGE New England Open that'll be coming up on June 28th. It's a Saturday. We'll be at Grave Troll Games in Nashua, New Hampshire. Next month, we will have more AGEs, both in LA and New England. So be on the lookout for those dates as they become available. In the meantime, however, go ahead and grab yourself a bag of Crank Cog Cane, put together Anthony's 80, take it to an armory, and have a lot of fun. Until next time, my name is Bryce Platts. I'm with Anthony Pham, and we'll see you next time.